My name is Kareem. I'm 28 years old, a software engineer living in the port city of Marseille, France. As a modern Muslim who still upholds traditional values, I have always dreamed of a peaceful family where loyalty and faith come first. Yet life sometimes throws you a trick that even the worst movie scripts could never imagine. Everything began 4 months ago on Muzzmatch. That's where I met Amira. From the very first messages, I was overwhelmed. She was nothing like the hot urban girls of Marseille. Amira radiated elegance, modesty, and deep religious devotion. She told me about her lifestyle. Amira never talked to strange men. She even shared that when she was in school, if there were male students in a group, she would ask a friend to act as an intermediary to pass along information rather than speak directly. I want to preserve my purity for my future husband, she said. Tell me, what man could possibly resist a declaration like that? Amira's family further reinforced that belief. Her father, a man with a strict yet dignified appearance, constantly reminded me of the responsibilities of a Muslim husband. We moved to marriage after only 4 months of getting to know each other, a period I believed was sufficient to test both our faiths. The wedding took place on a cold but radiant afternoon in December. I spared no expense to give her a dream wedding at a large reception hall overlooking the harbor. The cost reached 31,000 USD, the entirety of my savings accumulated over many years. I also gave her the first installment of the mahr, amounting to 13,000 USD, and signed a marriage contract with a total mahr value exceeding 300,000 USD as a promise that I would take care of her for the rest of her life. At that moment, seeing Amira in her pure white wedding dress shyly standing beside me, I believed I was the luckiest man in Marseille. I had no idea that this very pious facade was the beginning of a financial and emotional nightmare that would crush my life just 30 days later. Our honeymoon ended in early January. We returned to our small apartment in the 8th arrondissement of Marseille and began what I thought would be peaceful days as newlyweds. But the atmosphere at home quickly changed. Amira was no longer the shy girl I had fallen in love with. She began clinging tightly to her phone, always looking furtive and frequently startled whenever I entered the room. January 31st, exactly 1 month after we exchanged our vows, was the day my life took a dark turn. That morning, Amira was taking a shower and left her phone on the vanity table. A push notification appeared on the screen. It wasn't from WhatsApp or her family. It was the icon of the dating app we had once used to meet each other. My heart tightened. A wave of unease surged through me, and I couldn't stop myself from picking up the phone. The password was still our wedding date. I unlocked it, and what appeared before my eyes made me vomit on the spot. Amira had not only reinstalled the app immediately after our honeymoon ended, but she was also extremely active on it. Dozens of flirtatious, suggestive messages with different men all over Marseille. Crude language, explicit photos, things she had never once sent to me, her husband, were being generously sent to complete strangers. Even worse, the location history and messages showed that she had met them in person. While I was working overtime to pay off the debts from our lavish wedding, Amira was driving to the private homes of at least 2 different men. There was even one date where, according to the messages, they engaged in physical contact far beyond what I could tolerate. At that very moment, Amira stepped out of the bathroom with her hijab neatly in place, the symbol of purity she had always presented to the world. "Amira, what is this?" I said, trembling as I held the phone screen out to her. In a single second, that pious face changed color. There wasn't a single tear of remorse, not one reasonable explanation. She just stood there, looking at me with a cold gaze I had never seen before. That silence was more painful than any confession could have been. The woman who once declared that she would never talk to strange men in order to preserve herself for her husband turned out to have put enormous horns on my head while the ink on our marriage certificate hadn't even dried yet. The love, respect, and faith I had given her shattered into 1,000 pieces on the floor of my apartment that morning in Marseille. I called Amira's father. I was still naive enough to believe that if he was as devout as he appeared, he would help me resolve this humiliation fairly. He came to my place in Marseille that very afternoon. When I showed him the screenshots as evidence, he flew into a rage, viciously scolding Amira and even slapping her in front of me. Then he turned to me, his voice trembling. "Kareem, my son, I am deeply sorry. Our family is utterly disgraced. Whatever you decide now, I will support your decision." At that moment, though my heart was broken, there was still a trace of compassion left in me. I said, "Sir, I cannot live with a wife who betrays me in the very first month of marriage. I want a divorce. I will let Amira keep the 13,000 USD mahr I have already given, and I will not ask for a single cent back from the 31,000 USD wedding expenses. I only want peace. I will tell everyone that we were incompatible so she can still rebuild her life." I truly believed that was a humane way out for everyone, but no. Just a few hours after leaving my apartment, his attitude did a complete 180-degree turn. He called me back, but this time there was no remorse in his voice. Instead, it was cold and calculating. "Listen, Kareem, what my daughter does is her business, but the law is the law. In the marriage contract, nikah, you still owe us 83 taels of gold, equivalent to about 300,000 USD. If you want a divorce and want us to sign the papers peacefully, bring that money here." I was frozen. My ears rang as if I had just been struck by a thunderous punch. What? What are you talking about? Your daughter committed adultery. She deceived an entire marriage, and now you're demanding that I pay more money just to get divorced? "You have no choice," he snarled. "Either you pay in full, or I will turn your life here in Marseille into hell. Who do you think the community will believe? An abusive husband who threw his wife out, or a devout family like ours?" That was the moment I realized I had not only married the wrong promiscuous woman, but had also fallen into the trap of a professional extortion ring hiding behind religion. They did not care about honor or faith. The only thing they saw in me was an ATM machine named Kareem. The real battle began at that moment. From the instant that extortion call ended, my apartment in Marseille was no longer a home. It became a battlefield. Amira stopped pretending to cry. She changed completely, becoming sharp and terrifyingly knowledgeable about the law. The next morning, just as I woke up, the police knocked on my door. Amira was standing behind them, her face showing obvious fake panic, one hand clutching her shoulder as if in pain. She filed a complaint accusing me of physical assault. In France, a mere accusation of domestic violence immediately puts the husband at a disadvantage. She requested an emergency protection order, forcing me to leave the very apartment whose rent I was paying every month. I had to take shelter in a cheap motel near St. Charles Station, bitterly watching my life being torn apart. But that was not all. Amira and her father launched a full-scale legal attack. She requested that the court seal the entire case file under the pretext of protecting religious privacy. The real purpose was to prevent me from exposing evidence of her infidelity. She filed a motion to transfer the divorce case to a court in another city hundreds of kilometers from Marseille. She knew I was financially exhausted, and the constant travel for court hearings would crush me. Despite having been married for only 1 month and being the one who betrayed the marriage, Amira shamelessly demanded an extremely high monthly alimony, claiming that she could not work due to psychological trauma after abuse. Sitting in a damp rented room, I realized I was facing people who were extremely savvy with the French legal system. They knew exactly how to exploit policies designed to protect women and turn them into tools of extortion. Every legal filing they submitted came with an unspoken message from my father-in-law. Hand over 300,000 USD or we will sue you until you are ruined, socially and financially. I looked at my bank account, which was steadily draining because of legal fees. Rage erupted inside me. I decided I could no longer sit still and let them butcher me like this. I began devoting every remaining moment to digging into every corner of the past of this so-called model family in Marseille, and what I found went far beyond even the darkest crime movies. While being forced out of my own apartment in Marseille, I didn't sit there crying. I turned my anger into action. I spent night after night in cheap internet cafes searching public records related to Amira's family. What I uncovered sent chills down my spine. I hadn't just married an unfaithful wife. I had unknowingly plunged myself headfirst into the lair of a professional fraud ring. First, I discovered that my supposedly dignified father-in-law was in fact a master of false identities. He possessed multiple aliases to evade massive credit card debts. Records showed that this family was drowning in debt, repeatedly summoned by the courts, but consistently ignoring appearances, so cases were ruled in absentia.
They lived entirely on French government welfare and money extorted from people like me. But that was only the surface. When I dug deeper in archival records, I uncovered horrifying convictions.
He had once been arrested for large-scale possession and distribution of illegal substances. To obtain bail, he had been forced to post an enormous bond exceeding 500,000 USD. A devout man? No, he was a hardened crime boss. This was what horrified me the most. Before me, there had been a 21-year-old young man who fell into the same trap. When he wanted to break things off, this father staged threats, even vowing to send the entire family to meet their ancestors if the young man refused to marry Amira. Fortunately, security cameras at the young man's home recorded everything. The father was arrested, pretended to have a heart attack and mental illness to evade responsibility, but in the end still received 5 years of probation after spending enormous sums on private lawyers to avoid a 10-year prison sentence. The peak of it all was a staged truck accident. He sued for 5.5 million USD in damages. However, the Marseille court struck down the entire claim after discovering he had committed fraud and fabricated medical records regarding his injuries. Most disgusting of all, I found evidence that this was a meticulously calculated conspiracy. While Amira was having affairs, she and her father had already planned in advance to falsely accuse me of domestic abuse in order to seize the remaining 300,000 USD in Maher gold afterward. They even fabricated message logs to smear me online. It turned out Amira also had an older sister who had been driven out of the house by the same father because she could no longer endure his harsh rules and hypocrisy. The deeper I dug, the more I realized I had never been a husband. I was a business project for this father-daughter duo. They were deliberately dragging out the lawsuit so people would believe the marriage had lasted longer than it actually had, thereby justifying their financial demands. Holding the stack of documents in my hands, I trembled with fear, but also with resolve. They thought they could use the law to extort a so-called outsider like me? They were wrong. I would show all of Marseille the true face behind that pious mask. The battle in the Marseille courts became deadlocked as Amira and her father repeatedly resorted to dirty legal tricks. They didn't just want money, they wanted to destroy me completely. The climax came when Amira exploited her social media account with more than 10,000 followers to play the role of a victim, fabricating false stories about how I had abused and controlled her. But they underestimated me. Cornered, I decided to play my final cards to protect myself. First, I created a WhatsApp group that included every member of Amira's family and extended clan, from influential uncles to distant cousins. I said very little. I simply pressed send and unleashed a barrage of evidence. Screenshots of dating history, proving that Amira visited other men's homes during the very first month of marriage. Documents showing that she and her father were drowning in credit card debt and being pursued by the courts. Audio recordings proving that the father and daughter had meticulously planned the affairs and then the false accusations of domestic abuse in order to seize the remaining 300,000 USD in Maher gold. When the truth was exposed within their own family circle, the mask of the pious family shattered completely. Relatives who had long been deceived by them now turned against the father and daughter, condemning and feeling disgusted by their actions. It didn't stop there. In response to the frenzied online attacks incited by Amira, I released a video online exposing the entire story. The video went viral almost instantly. The Marseille online community flooded Amira's channels, demanding that she face the truth. Unable to prove her fabricated claims, she hurriedly deleted all her social media accounts in humiliation. Seeing the 300,000 USD extortion plan on the verge of total collapse, my father-in-law began to panic. He called me again, his tone no longer aggressive. He tried to bargain. All right, let's consider this a settlement. You don't need to pay the 300,000 USD anymore. Just give 30,000 USD and delete all the videos. I flatly refused. He lowered the price again. Then 15,000 USD will do. You can even pay in installments as long as you don't say anything else. I replied coldly, "You betrayed my trust, cheated on me, and tried to extort me. I won't give you even a single cent. Don't ever dream of it." That was the moment I knew I had won. They were no longer the ones controlling the game. They were just scammers desperately trying to salvage a few scraps of money from the ruins they had created themselves.
The final divorce hearing was scheduled for August 20th. As I entered the courtroom in Marseille, I was no longer the naive man I had been 6 months earlier. Amira and her father appeared with faces stripped of all arrogance. After the evidence of her infidelity and the father's criminal records had been made public, they knew the 300,000 USD extortion trap had completely failed. Still, the retaliation of people with nothing left to lose was despicable. When she realized she could no longer extract the Mar money, Amira called the social welfare office and falsely accused me of misappropriating her social benefits for my own gain. Another blow to my finances and reputation when I was already at rock bottom. The truth was that after pouring all my savings into the 31,000 USD facade wedding and the lavish honeymoon, I was completely exhausted financially. Combined with the legal fees required to fight the false accusations, I was forced to file for personal bankruptcy. There were days when I had to stand in line to receive food assistance from the French government just to survive. In court, I held firm to my final position. I accepted the total loss of the 31,000 USD wedding expenses and allowed her to keep the initial 13,000 USD Mar, considering it the price of buying my freedom from the devil. I categorically refused to pay a single cent of the remaining 300,000 USD Mar. I requested that the court officially record the truth of her infidelity to protect my personal record from false accusations. After reviewing the audio evidence proving that the father and daughter had planned the extortion, the judge issued a ruling in my favor. The horrifying 28-day marriage was officially brought to an end. Walking out of the courthouse, I looked up at the sky over Marseille. I had lost all my money, my career had been disrupted, and my trust had been trampled, but I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. At present, I'm starting over from zero in a small apartment in the suburbs. The lesson was painfully expensive, but it taught me this. A truly devout woman will not use faith as a shield for betrayal, and a father who truly loves his child will never turn that child into a tool for extortion. I want to state once again that this is entirely a true story that has just happened in Marseille, not the script of any television drama. The pain, betrayal, and court battles I went through are real scars etched into my life. The message I want to convey through this bitter story is this: never allow faith to be exploited as a shield for greed and deception. In love and marriage, religious devotion or strict doctrines are never a guarantee of a person's character. A truly good person proves themselves through actions, through honesty and self-respect, not through a flawless exterior or moral preaching. Always remain vigilant toward outward appearances, because once greed clouds the mind, people can invoke even the noblest values to commit the basest acts. Money can be earned again, but trust and honor, once lost, are extremely difficult to heal. I hope my story serves as a wake-up call for those standing at the threshold of marriage. Love with your heart, but judge a person with the clearest and most rational mind possible.